This is Anatomy and Physiology lesson 7. Today we're looking at blood vessels. So as always, we're going to have the booklet on the left hand side, what you need to complete in your lesson, and then the slides are going to be on the right hand side just for you to follow along. So the first thing is just to review what we've looked at already for the cardiovascular system, just to define some key terms that we went through last week. The next task is to describe how the cardiovascular system is needed for a sport of your choice. And then the last in that space at the bottom, just explain how cardiovascular fitness improves the function of your cardiovascular system. So pause now if you're going to have a go yourself, and I'm just going to work through and then I'll go through the answers in a second. Okay, so just go through some of those answers. The definitions then, vasodilation is the widening of blood vessels, so they get bigger. I may even add on there actually that increases blood flow. Vasoconstriction is the narrowing of blood vessels, which reduces blood flow. Pulmonary is anything to do with the lungs, so the pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein were ones that were key blood vessels we looked at last lesson. Veins visit the heart and arteries go away from the heart. An example of sport where your cardiovascular system is needed. For swimming, I've just identified two functions of the cardiovascular system. One is to deliver oxygen to the working muscles. That is needed for energy. And then another function of the cardiovascular system is to maintain body temperature, maybe in cold water, so that may be an important function. And then lastly, how cardiovascular fitness improves the function of your cardiovascular system. If your heart is stronger, it's able to supply more oxygen to the muscles during exercise. Obviously the benefit of that is it reduces fatigue. Okay. So our lesson today is just to look at how different blood vessels are important during exercise. So I'm just going to go into some of those in a little bit more detail and identify some key characteristics for each of those blood vessels. So the structure of blood vessels just at the bottom of that page underneath you do now. There are 3 types of blood vessels which we need to know. We've got arteries, which we've said take blood away from the heart. We have veins, which return blood to the heart. And then we've got capillaries. Which distribute blood within the organs. And again, they play a key role as well. So the arteries, veins and capillaries work together to provide muscles with oxygen that they need to work and carrying deoxygenated back to the heart so that it can be reoxygenated. This process is improved with our cardiovascular fitness. Turn the page and you've got a couple of pages to complete now on each of the blood vessels. So you've got one on arteries, one on veins, and then on the next page the capillaries. So this will make it quite a useful revision sheet just to cover all of those in a good amount of detail. So just at the top, arteries, their function is to take blood away from the heart. So I'm just going to fill that out on that top line. A common misconception with arteries, or a function of arteries, is that they carry oxygenated blood, but that's not factually correct. So with the main characteristic is that they take blood away from the heart. So arteries have thicker walls. This is just filling out the bottom. Arteries have thicker walls as they carry blood which is at high pressure. They carry arterial or oxygenated blood. Away from the heart, and they pulsate as the heart beats. The question here though is, why is the pulmonary artery different, which we're going to talk about in a second. The lumen, which we're going to label in a second, the lumen is the sort of the tube inside of the blood vessel that will widen to allow more blood to flow through the arteries, and this happens during exercise. So labelling your arteries then, we've got that they are more elastic, so they can change their diameter. They've got a large lumen, which is the space in the middle, so I'm just going to make that clear with where I'm pointing that to. They've got thick muscular walls. To cope with high levels of blood pressure. Because the blood's just been ejected out of the heart, it's obviously under a much higher pressure, which is why they need to be able to change their size, why they need the thick muscle walls. They pulsate, so they'll be able to just squeeze blood along just to make sure it keeps going in the direction that it needs to. And they carry blood away from the heart. I'm just going to write away from the heart. So a common misconception is that they all carry oxygenated blood, but we're just going to make a note here that the pulmonary artery is different. The pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood. So it's still travelling away from the heart, but it's going on the way to the lungs to get that oxygen. So it's still classed as an artery, it's still travelling away. That's why we can't say that arteries carry oxygenated blood, because that one doesn't. And then they're important for sport because that delivery of oxygen is needed for energy. The better supply of energy we can get to our working muscles, the more energy we will have to be able to play and can maintain aerobic respiration. Okay, turning the page onto veins. So onto the next page. Exactly the same layout, just for the other side. So veins, their main characteristic is that they visit the heart. So they are less elastic, and that will be because they are under lower amounts of pressure. They will still have their lumen, the sort of tube in the middle. The muscle walls are thinner. A key characteristic with veins is they have these valves, and that will be to prevent backflow of blood. They carry it under low pressure. And it's to the heart. And then just filling out that information at the bottom. Veins have much thinner walls, less elastic, and carry blood at much lower pressure. They carry venous or deoxygenated blood generally, and it's back to the heart in the direction of travel. Valves, which is the key characteristic, prevent backflow of blood, which could happen due to blood being at a lower pressure. And then, as before, and then again, the pulmonary vein is different because it carries oxygenated blood. From the lungs to the heart. So again, we can't say veins carry deoxygenated blood because this one is different, but it's still classed as a vein because it's visiting the heart. And then why a vein's important in sport is it ensures blood is returned to the heart. To continue the cardiac cycle. So then that blood can go back to the heart, go back to the lungs, collect more oxygen, the process starts again. So again, revision, resource for veins, those two could go together nicely to make quite a nice image. That should be a double page in your booklets as well, which should make it a little bit easier to look at. So moving on then, capillaries, your last one, so turning the page. Capillaries are microscopic vessels. So they're very, very small. They're only 1 cell thick, and they link arteries to veins. So these are kind of the middleman in between the arteries. The arteries are taking the blood away. The veins are bringing it back. So you can see in your little diagram there, it's a little bit small, but you can see the direction of blood flow of arteries bringing the oxygen towards the cells. The capillaries are the bits in the middle where those blood vessels get smaller and smaller and smaller until they're only 1 cell thick. The oxygen gets delivered, the carbon dioxide gets picked up, and then the veins bring the blood back. So capillaries that carry arterial blood transfer oxygen and nutrients to the muscles. Again, oxygen is needed for energy. They then carry the venous blood, which is deoxygenated, into the veins. They pick up waste products and they remove them from the body. We look at this also in the respiratory system, but the capillaries are where gaseous exchange takes place. And that is where oxygen goes into the capillary wall and into the tissue for energy, and then carbon dioxide passes through the tissue and back into the blood so it can be removed from the body. Again, gaseous exchange will link to the respiratory system, that will come on to in a couple of lessons time. So summary of blood vessels, you've got this slide sort of been outlined on the bottom of this page here. So arteries, you've got a little cross section with a couple of key characteristics. So the non-elastic fibres, the muscle and elastic fibres, you've got your veins and your capillaries, and you've got a couple of bullet points about each one. So your key characteristic with arteries, thick muscular wall, and they can the muscle wall of those arteries contract to force blood along. Veins thinner and less muscular walls, and blood's under a lower pressure. And then lastly, your capillaries, they're only 1 cell thick, so it allows that exchange to take place. And then again, just quite a useful picture to have in there. You could highlight key bits of information here on the arteries, on the veins. I'll try to stick to the same colours. So the wall of an artery is thick, has a lot of muscle and elastic fibres. The lumen, which is the space inside where blood travels, is small in relation to the diameter of the artery. Obviously the most of it's taken up by the thickness of the muscle. The veins have much thinner walls, much less muscle. The lumen's a little bit larger in these, but these are going to have valves to prevent backflow, which I'm just going to write that on there as well. And then your capillaries, you can see, very, very small. Only 1 cell thick. And it's just about big enough for a red blood cell to squeeze through. Okay, so again, summary of your blood vessels just in those two there. So, moving on to some tasks and exam questions. Your tasks, first of all, is just to make a comparison between arteries and veins. What characteristics do they share? What characteristics make them unique? And on the other side, you've got a cross-section of an artery, one that shows normal blood flow, and one where the lumen's been narrowed by plaque or a build-up, like fatty deposit. Your question is to explain how that will affect the function of the cardiovascular system. So again, you can pause at this point, have a go yourself, and then I'll go through it in a couple of minutes. So separate characteristics, main ones for veins: low pressure, valves, visit the heart; arteries, high pressure, thick walls, travel away from the heart. Shared characteristics, they both carry oxygen and deoxygenated blood. And then for the build-up of plaque, will narrow the lumen of the artery and can reduce blood flow. This could lead to a blockage of blood, and it can also lead to a reduction in the delivery of oxygen to the cells of the body. Again, that could lead to fatigue, or that could be something a little bit more severe. And then last little bit of information, there is the task or the exam question today is looking on blood distribution. So this is linked to one of the functions of the cardiovascular system around vascular shunting. So we're just going to look at that in a little bit more detail now, and this is going to link to the exam question at the end of the lesson. So when you exercise, the distribution of blood in your body changes as your muscles need more blood. Really, they need more oxygen. So vascular shunting is the process that increases blood to active areas during exercise, and it would decrease blood flow to areas where it's not needed. This is achieved through vasodilation and vasoconstriction. These are two words we use in the do now that we talked about for the functions of the cardiovascular system. So when you start to exercise, your heart rate will increase and your blood vessels will increase blood flow to the working muscles and increase blood pressure. So in your booklet we're saying that the blood vessels will get wider to increase blood flow to working muscles, and this will increase that increase of blood flow will increase blood pressure. As you continue to exercise, your muscles work harder and harder. Oxygen levels start to drop, causing a build-up of lactic acid and carbon dioxide. Blood vessels will widen or dilate to increase the ease of blood being able to get to the muscles, and that will help lower some blood pressure. Blood vessels closer to the surface, or blood vessels move closer to the surface, and it will allow heat to be released. So just to be a bit more clear with that explanation there, vasodilation is the widening of blood vessels to increase blood flow. So during exercise that will happen so blood flow can increase to your working muscles so they can get more oxygen. Vasoconstriction is the narrowing of blood vessels to reduce blood flow. So that may happen around like your digestive system. You're not going to send as much blood to that sort of area of the body, because we need to prioritise where the blood needs to go to, which is your working muscles. Again, so how can you make this process work more efficiently? It's why things like not being eating before exercise, because you're going to be trying to prioritise blood flow to two different areas. It's why a lot of the time you'll feel sick afterwards. So it's if we're exercising, if we're eating at the right amount of time to allow the blood flow to go to the areas where it's most needed. So putting that into a context of an exam question, your final thing today is just to explain how blood distribution works during exercise, and that's for 3 marks. So I'm going to do this in the PEB responses, which we've talked about previously. This is an explanation question. It's worth 3 marks, and this is going to be where we're going to use a point, explanation, and benefit. So my point here will be, can I give a definition of vascular shunting? So that's me talking about the key word that's been used in the question. So blood distribution, the key word is vascular shunting. So vascular shunting is the process of directing blood flow to active areas. That would give me a mark for just stating that fact. What I now need to do is explain what I mean by that, or explain how does it work. This works through the widening of blood vessels, I'll put in brackets vasodilation, to increase blood flow of the blood during to the working muscles during exercise. I could even add on there that it would reduce blood flow through vasoconstriction to areas where blood's not needed. What I'm then going to do is the benefit of that. So during exercise, why is that important for us to be able to do that? By increasing blood flow to the working muscles and increased supply of oxygen ensures more energy is available. So with any question we have where we have to do longer answer responses, we need to be able to call upon the keyword. Can we be confident on defining the keyword? Once we've done that, we then just explain what it means, or give a little bit more context, and then we link to the benefit that it has on performance.